Okay, thank you all for joining us today. So I'm gonna talk today about like using the Arab form in my work and relate it to the archives collection here. But also I wanted, like a question that I always get: how did I get to book arts and what made me interested in this? So I'm gonna talk briefly about this. Then we'll go through my different works and the process that I do. So my first encounter with books generally was, like I knew like everyone like the regular book style, like either, like the hard bound ones or the commercial ones. And this was also my experience when I was a student studying. I had an interest in graphic design and in books in general. And I heard about an exhibition. Its name was One of a Kind Artist Book. It came to Cairo Library through the USAID, and it was showing in different parts of the world also. So as a student at that time, like I wanted really to go to see these books. I was expecting to see books like these, like very traditional books. I wanted to see the layout, the design of them, the colors, all this. But when I went there, I was struck actually by the kind of books I've seen. So its relation to the book and its, answers to what a book is was very different than what I was expecting. So seeds, handmade paper, some of them had very old forms, some of them even, like have parts of the book. So it might be the print, it might be the enclosure, it might be the type, but also some of them use different materials, like metal, or alter some of the old books, or use old structures in contemporary ways. So really this made me think a lot about what is an artist book, and like became really interested in this form from them. So when the chance came to do a workshop at where I was working at Egypt, I did 3 workshops. This was an experimental workshop where I was invited, among others. We were trying to explore different art forms, so that were new to Egyptian students. So things like video art or book art, sequential art. So I was invited 3 years, and the students became very interested in this art form. In Egypt at that time, there was no academic program that would teach that, and there were very limited resources. So it was more experimental, trying different things, putting things together, using very primitive ways of production, photocopying or pressing plants together to make paper. But really the outcome was really amazing. The students did a really great job. Although they had very limited resources, they used things that they are good at. So some of them used their experiences in computer software or stitching or woodworking. And this was the opening. We had a large turnout of the students, and we were also invited to the AUC, to American University at Cairo, to showcase the exhibition. So from that time, I started to look at different programs that, like I wanted really to increase my experience with book arts. So that's the reason I chose to go to Iowa, University of Iowa. They have really a great program, University of Iowa Center for the Book. So I was there doing my PhD in art education, and I was planning to take some classes at UICB. At that time, they offered a graduate certificate, so you can be at any other program, and then you can take some classes there. But I was lucky that the time I was there, they start. So a year after I started the graduate certificate, they started a new program, an MFA in book arts. So this was really perfect timing for me to go to start the MFA. I already had some classes at the center, so I just continued classes towards the MFA degree. different classes I took there related to book arts, and all these classes really affected me and affected my work, inspired a lot of my work. So paper making was really a very important class with Tim Barrett, letterpress printing, where, you know, like I started to, you know, like learn a lot about Western type and do a lot of things. And at that time also I started to think of how to use Arabic type and typography. Can we have these? Yep. Yeah, these two, yeah.
You want to switch?
Yes, please. We're going to switch to the camera. So I'm going to show you also some examples here from the archive that relates also to my work. Okay, so here you can see, also we can't have both at the same time, the presentation and this.
I don't know, unfortunately we can't.
Okay, that's fine.
So we can switch back. Though,
yeah, sure. So here, you know, like you can see these different letter set. It's called letter set Arabica, and it's like a type specimen. So different forms of the letter are here. And this what I did in a lot of my work. I would focus on a specific letter form or different letter forms. But one of the problems of working with Arabic type that at the center for the book, or even in Egypt also, there are not left so much of the Arabic type. So for example, this is a very old book about letter setting for a foundry. It dates from 1925. So for me, this was a problem because, you know, like, although I worked with Western type, but I also wanted to work with other, with Arabic type forms. Yeah, so let's switch back. Yes. So one of the things that I did a series of posters, broadsides, where, you know, like I started to carve the letters using linoleum. Then I would print with them. So this was my first encounter with using Arabic letters. I wanted to use them. I created a series of these different colors. Oh, sure. Also, the classes that were very interesting for me, bookbinding 1 and 2, learning about these. But the most class that really influenced my work was historical book structures with Julie Leonard, where we studied, you know, like the different uncommon letter book forms and where did they existed in different parts of the world. And this class really inspired me to, you know, like look at these forms and think of ways to use them in book art. So, for example, here, this is an Nag Hammadi binding model in papyrus. We did also, you know, like we looked at the books in different parts of the world where if they have no access to paper, for example, how would it like? And these books are very unique because also the way they open and close is very different than traditional books that we used to. So they offer more, I guess, you know, like experience for the user. You're not only turning the pages, but you're opening it and reading it in a different way. And usually all these old historic books, they would contain either religious texts, some scientific texts, but, you know, like the forms themselves are not used anymore in book art. Here, this is also a book from the multi-quire Coptic book. So the idea that the book was very precious thing at that time, so people would make these wrappers around it from leathers. And this is something also I used after that in a lot of my work. So same thing here, another example from the 4th century, leather straps that go around the book and offer protection. And the different Ethiopian and Coptic models also I created in this class. So all these things that I was creating helped me a lot after that in deciding what structures should I use, what kind of content I can add to it. Greek sewing model, I use also this model in one of my artist book. And here also I created an Islamic codex. So the paper, the binding, everything was done by hand, the dyeing of the paper. Next, I'm going to talk about my artist books. And so here, this is one of the first books I created at Iowa City. I was really interested in the relationship between Cairo and Iowa City, the connections and the differences. So, and here I used also Arabic and English type, which I use in a lot of my books. So the words, the spelling of the word Cairo and Iowa City is written in both English and Arabic. Outside of the book as well as inside, while the content is about the green landscape. So it have different images from old Arabic manuscripts that lists different plants and their uses, while the bottom part have description of the plants that grows in Iowa. So it was really a nice project to do. Also, this is another piece that I did, orientation. So I spelled the word orientation in Arabic and English, and then started to make this structure. And it have these different layers of type. So, and towards the end, you can see the word orientation spelled. This was cut by hand, so I did some hand cutting. But one of the things I started to do later on also is to make plates. So instead of carving the linoleum plates, I was introduced in one of the classes to the other plates, the polymer plates. So it made things much easier. So I would create the file computer, and then I would make, like a positive and a negative. And this offered me to combine the old structure, the Nag Hammadi structure, the handmade paper that I made, and also the printing of these are not words, they are more like a calligraphy on the different pages. Here also you can see how I use the structure I showed you. It's called the Orissa palm leaf style binding, and it's a bilingual book also. So one side of it have Arabic letters, just calligraphic forms, and the other side would have English forms. And the way so a lot of these books also require the user interact with them. So you can fold it in a different way, you can put it in a different way and interact with that. Here, this is a book, and I'm going to show this because we have it here at the Letterform Archive. So this is also one of the books that I started to think of using the laser cutter, another technique that I use a lot in my work. And I'm going to show it to you in action and how it works. So here, as you can see, the structure is based on the Coptic binding. So it's a link stitch with an Ethiopian end bands. Here we go. So this is the structure. You can see here the links here. And also I use the polymer plate to get the impression on the top and the bottom here. And the idea that the book, like I created this book playing with the idea that you can judge a book with its cover. So actually it doesn't have any content inside it. All the content is on the sides of the book. And when you open it, it starts to diffuse. But when you close it, you start to see these different letter forms. And to create it also, I would make edge painting. So I would color the edges. Then I would use the laser to remove these colors. So all what you can see here, the color is the colors of the pages after removing the paint from it. Okay. So yeah, let's go back, switch back to
Okay. Actually, we could keep it on the camera here and keep the slides going if you want.
Oh, really? Okay, sure. So this is also another piece that I created, but so the same concept mainly, but like different colors. So I would burn directly on the paper. So the letter that you see is the laser marks on it. Here also we have this structure here. So this is a Greek binding. So it's basically two parts of a book that comes together. So you can see it here. It's called sequence 1.
If you go very slow, it will focus.
Oh, okay.
Give it time.
Sure. Yeah, we're getting it. So, and this book also is about an Arabic letter, the Dad letter, which is a very unique to the Arabic language. So it's unique because the way it's pronounced, it's not like a D, but it's more like a Dad. So it's been always said that the Arabic is the Dad language because the uniqueness of this letter. So what I did is that I started to collect different shapes of this letter. So whether they are calligraphic forms, very early forms, calligraphic forms, things from the Middle Ages, things from even to the new fonts created. So I would select the shape of the Dad, and then I would laser cut it on the flax handmade paper. So this is a paper that also I created while I was a student at Iowa, made out of flax.
It's a brand new archive.
And it's this is a new addition to the archive. So it would be available online also once it gets digitized. And again, it have this action, this beautiful action that I really like when turning the pages. It's almost like a slinky, Another also book that I created is 28 letters on handmade paper, and each of the sections would have a letter. And so it's also very sculptural because of the paper and the structure itself. So also I started to look at different old manuscripts. So this is the famous Blue Quran. And really, I like the way it is, the way it's presented, the contrast between the blue background and the golden letters. So I started to look at these sort of things, and I created, like my own interpretation for it. So I created a whole series about the marginalia series. This is one of them. It's a one of a kind. So I pressed the covers. It's based on an Islamic structure, leather covered Islamic binding. And then inside you would find these different, like layouts similar to a lot of the old. So here, this is an old manuscript. And as you can see that, like the main text is inside these rectangles, while like there are different marginalia. So originally, the book would have these very large margins that would be empty, and then people would start adding to it. And sometimes, like the book became important not because of the content, but because of the kind of marginalia that it is in, maybe because of who wrote it or when it was wrote. So I created another also interpretation for this. So this is a book of mine. So it's Marginalia 6. So it plays with the same idea also. So I would take these margins and then I would laser cut them on handmade paper. the different layering that it is here. So you can see the background of the colors of the paper. Same thing here also. So the layout is very unique, and this is what really intrigued me to create a whole series about these structures and also the content of them. And I'm using also the Coptic and Ethiopian. So again, another piece that explored this idea, the marginalia, where here, I use more contemporary approach. So the covers were made out of plexiglass that is laser cut also, while the interior would have, and again, it's very similar to the, I was inspired from manuscripts like this, where you would really find them in a lot of museums. The pages are very unique with all the markings that they have, with all the different layout, the layout that's really unique. So each page sometimes literally is different than the other one. So I would take parts of them, and I was mainly concerned about, interested in the layout, not about their content. I was interested in how they looked on the pages, how they would look when you turn the pages, and all this. I also created a series of books about, what happened in Egypt during the Arab Spring. So this is the first one I created. It's called Asda, which is echoes. So, and in this I use a Letterform Kufic script, which is a very rectangular type form. And I would develop it on the computer. So I started to develop all this on the computer. It spells the words عيش حرية عدالة اجتماعية, which means livelihood, freedom, and social justice. So these three words are in a sequence in a book. It's almost like a chant where, they start with one word in one of the sections of the book, and as you go through the book, they start to fill the whole page. While I did the map of Cairo also on the front, on the back, as well as on the sides. So this was the first book I created on this concept. And this is the second one also. It's called the Square, or Midan, which references Tahrir Square in Egypt. And this we have here. So again, I can show you. So here I used other words also, Ashab, which means the people. You read, wants, the spot, to bring down, the regime. So these are basically the four words in the whole book, but they keep repeating in a different way. So as you go, and my unit here is the section. So to do the book, I would first design each section of it. And section, if you don't know, is a a number of paper that's put together and folded. So a number of folios together would make a section. So this would be my section when I use the laser, and then you can cut the whole section one time. And depending on the power and the speed, you can have control on what you're doing. So it keeps going, in this sequence throughout the book, and towards the end, it would fill the whole page. So here, and also the laser have a very nice effect, which I like in a lot of my work. So there is the fading effect. So, which relates well also to the concept of the book. So these words are almost fading also, and the shadows that you get when you turn the pages. So again, it's arranged in different layouts throughout the book, and then it fills the whole page here. Then it's spelled in English also. The people wants to bring down the regime, And then towards the end, the people have brought down the regime 6 p.m. Cairo local time on 11 February 21. So it's like a documentation again for the chants that were done by the people. Next, this is also another book that I created. So it's one of a kind, and I used and this book is different because also the paper was created using a watermark. So you can see part of it, but the paper itself is almost embedded with with Arabic letters inside it. Then I printed on it also with white. These different marginalia texts were printed on it. And it's a Greek binding. So I also like to combine these different elements together. So, like Coptic and Greek and Islamic. So I like really this idea of mixing these things together to create something new. And this is my newest work. It's called Statura. And I have it with me here also. So you can see that it have wooden covers here. It also has the leather, like wrappers around them, like similar to the historic structure I showed you at the beginning. And also it has these different bones here, bone pieces inside it. So this is actually based on a calligraphy exercise that a lot of the calligraphers would do, which is based on the dot. A lot of the letters in Arabic calligraphy are based on the dot system, where an alif, which resembles the A, for example, the letter that you see here, would, in order to write it correctly, it would need to be 5 dots, for example. And like another letter, like the B, for example, needs to have a specific dimensions for each part of it. So one of the exercises that calligraphers do always, whether they're starting calligraphy or in their mid-career or even experienced calligrapher, they create these beautiful plaquettes and boards of calligraphy where they start to show their experience in doing these different exercises. And this is also what inspired me in this book. So this book is basically inspired from one of their exercises where they start to put the letters together, again, not in a specific order, but just as a way to show their experience in doing these letters and their dimensions. But also I tried something different here, where in the background, what you can see, the text in the background is a text by ordinary people. So these are documents from the turn of the century, which I really like their layout. I like their contrast, like the seals, the marks of the ordinary people, the different hands in their handwriting that contrasts with the printed letters. So this is an edition of 30, but each page is different and each book is different. So you can see the different letters, how they are written. And then on the background, the different colors, seals, marks that mark the background. And also, so it's echoed also in its closure. So you see these different, the rhombus square here, these rhombus have also this letter on one side and on the other side. And they act also as a closure to the book. So the wrapper goes around it like this, and then it can be closed. Okay. So another image from the book and here. And yeah, and this is my contact info if you have any comments, and then we'll have some time for questions also. Yes.
So one thing is that you may have had a smaller screen to see some of the books. So we can now switch over to the big, switch the camera over to that now. So anything that people would like to see more of, we can always pull those out. We have one question in the Q&A, and it's just a hello, greetings from Iowa.
Hello.
Eduardo Garcia.
Yeah.
We
Hello,
did
everyone.
have one question in the chat, however.
Okay.
Great.
So this question says, I have been showing your work to students for many years and have been a big admirer. One question that has come up several times when discussing your work is if the laser cut as a technique works conceptually in some way, like in absence. Or for example, in Echoes, the burn from the laser cutting process works quite dramatically in the context of the protests there. Thank you. Yeah.
Oh,
Did you have
that's a great
any?
question.
Yeah.
It's a really great question because, you know, like I have one of the creators who have seen this book. He told me that this is almost like a phoenix, you know, like the burning that you're doing in this book is almost like a phoenix. So in a way, you know, like you are repeating these, you know, like different words that, you know, like people need to repeat in a different way, you know, like from ashes, this will be a new, you know, like revolution or something. So, and also sometimes I would control it. So sometimes I would go all the way through the section. And in some of my other books, for example, I wanted to hit a specific place. I don't want it to be this yellowish. So you have control on it also. But I think it really works well with the collection, with either the square and also Echoes, the idea of burning the words and you know, like feeding. I think it really works well conceptually with the idea of the book also, you know, because after looking after, you know, like 10 years after this happened, it's, you know, like it's almost, you know, like faded also, this idea of, you know, like of having, you know, like a democracy and having really representation for the people. It faded also, which is similar to, you know, like to some of the pages, you know, like here, for example, the words have faded also here. So this is really interesting comment. Thank you.
Another aspect in terms of the archives experience with the book is that we show this quite often in tours, and as we handle it, there have been times that parts that were not fully cut, you know, become loose, or maybe even a piece comes through, you know, one of the chads or whatever you would call it that is trimmed actually comes out. So that's kind of part of the experience too, that the book actually changes over time, at least for us.
Yeah.
Any other things people would like to see on the larger screen? This one was the first one, and we had it on the smaller speaker video. So
The blue book. They want to see the blue book. Yeah, sure.
They mean this?
I think this, yeah, I think this one, yeah.
Okay. Would you like to handle it?
Sure, yeah, sure. So, and this book is different because, you know, like I usually, what I do is that, as I showed you in the other works, where I start to work with the section, but here each folio would have a different design. So each folio is different, either the color or the layout.
I actually do have a question from my friend Ashi, who's in the chat also.
Sure.
She's in the audience. So the question is, Are your books meant to be read by a wider audience, or is the impact meant to be purely visual? And I think we're wondering this question in terms of people engaging with your work who may not have the same familiarity with Arabic.
Uh-huh. And so it depends on the book. So some of my books are really based on the letter forms only, but still, I think you can still appreciate the beauty of the layout, the use of color, how it's composed, the structure itself, and how it acts, it opens and closes. So there are a lot of things, like in a book that you can see, not only the text, even if you can't understand it. So, like, for example, here you can still appreciate what's here, even you don't know the language, and the same thing is here also. Other of my books, like that have content that, like I wanted to reach a wider audience. So, for example, the Maidan, the square, it's all Arabic, but towards the end, I added just 2 English sentences that really explore, like gives them more understanding for people. So I do this in a lot of my work, and some of my work also is bilingual. So my more recent pieces, I would always have, like 2 titles, one English, one Arabic. Same for the content also, I would have them both. But some of them also, like are very, like, so for example, here, this one, it's very conceptual, it's very sculptural also. So you can just start, like almost play with it and, like manipulate it in a different ways. It doesn't need really that you understand Arabic to appreciate the beauty of the structure and what you can create with it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing. That actually went into, like, you started to touch on another question that I had, which was about, like, how would you want someone to ideally interact with the piece? Is it meant to exist more as like an art object or a sculpture that people would look at, or would you want people to actually like get up close and personal with it and play with it?
That's an excellent question, like, and it relates to a lot of the artist's books. So, like, are they meant to be in cases and not interacted with, or are they meant to be, like, handled to people? And this differs from one artist to another. But for me personally, I really like when people start to touch my books and, like, manipulate them and play with them, because a lot of my books require this interaction. So, like, whether this piece here, the square, you need really to touch it, to hold it, to turn the pages. So whenever possible, when I display my work, I don't like to display it in cases, like I like people to hold it, to turn the pages, to see what's inside it. So I like that. So even my recent work, I'm doing a piece, I did a piece that I showed at Corex about the Mediterranean crisis, Mediterranean immigrant crisis. And to get the full experience, you need really to, like, turn the pages, and there are parts that you need to take out of the box, and it's almost like a game to play with it, where there are boats, brass boats that you need to move throughout the book. So I like this experience of the viewer. And even for a book like this, like Statera, for example, it's the experience of opening the book. So you have all these, like, wrappers around it, and then, like, this is something we miss in contemporary books, like the regular books that are now, like, sold everywhere. This idea of, like, opening and interacting with the structure, opening it, and then, like, turning the pages. And so I really like the physically. Yeah.
Absolutely. And even in your work, it reminds me so much of just the relationship that that I've seen, at least in the past, of Arabic letters having with architecture. Like, it feels very architectural even in your books. And when I think back to like how we see the letters on the walls of the masjids, and even like for like a really big example, like even on the Taj Mahal, the way the script is just, it like expands over the walls. Like I
Yeah.
really get that in your books.
Yeah,
Oh,
exactly.
I feel we're getting a lot more questions in the Q&A now, so I
Okay,
guess we'll
sure.
start diving into these a little. Okay, so anonymous attendee has asked us, what are the challenges in working with cursive script like Arabic?
Oh, that's, yeah. So one of the challenges with working with, because, you know, like Arabic is being cursive, so it requires a specific ways to design it. You know, like it's not like separate letters like the Western letters. So this is something I always, you know, like keep in mind, you know, like the multiple forms. So yeah, so for example, here, you know, like you can see the multiple forms of the letter. Each letter can have multiple forms. So I need to keep this in mind when, for example, when I'm laser cutting the letters, in order for them to stay legible, I need to compose them in a different way. So here you can see also here same thing. So different letters here also. So
the catalog you just looked at was a metal type catalog, and this one is transfer or rub down lettering,
yeah.
like Letterforms.
So yeah, and also depending on the material that I'll be using. So maybe if I will be so working with paper, for example, and designing letters that will be cut on a paper in the page layout will be completely different than if it is on the cover, on the wood, or on a plexiglass. So again, I take all these, you know, like the material is part of my consideration in doing the book. And I try with different materials. So I will, you know, like in the process of doing the book, I try with, you know, different materials. I would apply it. I would waste a lot of materials just to check what would work perfectly. Yep. So thank you.
And that kind of leads into another question that we got from Ayana. And Ayana asks, how do you source your materials, leather, papyrus, etc.?
Oh yeah. So so first I was living in the US here. So, you know, like a lot of the problems were to find things maybe like papyrus. The leather is very expensive. But when I went back to Egypt, it's the other way. So, you know, like the materials that I need there are like things like, for example, book cloth. I don't find it. Japanese paper, I don't find it. So it depends on the place that you are staying. So in Egypt, I have access to leather easily. I can access leather. Different types of paper, you know, like sometimes I would bring these also from here through my visits to the US. And in some of my works also, especially when I was a student at the University of Iowa, we would find replacement for books. So for example, the structure that I showed you, the one that is rectangular and long, the Orissa palm leaf structures, these were originally done by a specific kind of palm leaves that doesn't grow in the US. So I had to come up with different material, which was the balsa wood, to have similar effect. And this is what I do always. So I did it a lot in studying historical book structures because some materials you access to it anymore. And also I do it now. So, you know, like depending. So when I was in the US, having access to wood, example, I would bring, it was very easy to bring quarter sawn wood, which is the wood I use. Specific wood that needs to be cut in a specific way. So I would get it easily. But when going back to Egypt, I used another kind of wood. So here, for example, this is, you know, like olive wood. So all these collection, I did it when I was in the US, while this I did it in Egypt. So there are always ways to find other materials. Bone also is a very, you know, like material that camel bone is the material that I have access to it in Egypt. So these small pieces here are made out of camel bone. So you will find there is always this problem on what materials you have access to and how are you going to use it in your work.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Now, I guess going away from the production side of things a little bit, we have a question from Akshata where they're asking, before you begin making a book, how do you go about conceptualizing it? What does that phase look like?
Oh, okay. So yeah. So to get inspiration, sometimes I would start from a specific structure. So there are specific structure that I would like, and I want to make content around them. And sometimes I have an idea. The idea is really, I have some, like sort of idea. Then I start to do some sketches to it. Let me bring just one.
Sure.
Good that I have my sketchbook. I didn't expect it's coming, but yeah. So here, this is my sketchbook, and so this is a lot of the process that I go through. So whenever there is something that that interests me, I started to make sketches, start to collect different ideas about it. So here, this is a project that I am working on now. It's inspired from a specific, it's called Muqarnas in Islamic architecture. So I started to make different ideas. I go a lot to places to see, and museums to see what's there is. These are sketches of also one of my latest book, and it's on my website also. So it's about these talismanic shirts that were worn by sultans mostly in Ottoman Empire, but also in Iran, in some parts of India, in the Middle East. And their idea was that this shirt would have different scripts on it, some of them religious scripts, magical scripts, and they would wear it before going to battle, or if they are sick, or during celebrations. So they have different purposes. But really, this idea of like wearing something to make you almost like a superhero intrigued me. So I started to do a lot of sketches, and as you can see here also, so I think how the presentation will be, how I'm gonna present these. These are also different other projects that are happening. So I do a lot of writing, a lot of sketches. So here again, for the same project of the dress, you will find here, like some sketches for the structure, how it's gonna be. Yeah, so I do a lot of sketching and reading and research for my project. And also it keeps changing a lot. So I start with, like the idea is the same, but like the way I'm gonna present it and the way I'm gonna execute it changes a lot while I am working on it.
Thank you so much for sharing your personal sketchbook with us.
You're yeah. So
really amazing to see.
So these are also for my book, the Mare Nostrum one. So, yep.
And usually when you work, do you just maintain one sketchbook at a time, or do you have multiple sketchbooks?
No, I have multiple, I have this is a small one. So I have like with size, I work with size. So I have this small one where I make the small ideas, then the larger one for maybe more detailed, or, like, because sometimes I would, in the small one, I would finish this idea, then there is something that I want to add. So I have to go like leave 3 or 4 pages, then and add something. Yeah. So.
And just coming back to that, a lot of your work, like, we're able to interact with it, like we're able to hold it just in our 2 hands. They are like much smaller scale. What would you say is the largest scale format you've ever worked in before, or you're willing to work in?
Yeah, so I started, so my 2 recent books, Transpose and Mare Nostrum, these are the 2 books that I created, and you can have a look at them at also my website. They're available there. I started to make books larger, and also I'm started to make boxes. So it's not only the book, but it's the box and the experience that you get from, like, so for example, Transpose, which is the one about the talismanic shirts. It's almost like a drawer where you would open it and then you would start to remove these shirts from it and rearrange it in a different way. So I started, so here is the website. Thanks, Stephen, for posting this. So these, you can have a look at them. So I started to make things that are larger, that, whether the Transpose or the Mare Nostrum.
But do you prefer to work in smaller scale usually?
I do, like it have, like logistically, material-wise,
Yes.
everything. I think it's just much easier. So, like I'm having some problems now with the larger books and moving them, transposing them from place to place, all this. But still, sometimes you need also this size to issue an idea. So in my work, Mare Nostrum, I needed something that is long, like representation for the Mediterranean. And also I wanted another compartment that I would put the different brass metal pieces in it. So in both of these, really the size really is an important part of it also for the viewer to interact with. They can't be, I think they can't be smaller than this.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's go back to some more questions from the Q&A.
Sure.
We just have a couple more. So an anonymous attendee has asked, with the marginalia in the blue book, how did you think about the arrangement of the text in the book itself? Are the passages arranged in the reading order from the base text, or are they arranged out of order for a more aesthetic purpose or something else? Interested in your thought process for the creation of this.
So when for the marginalia series, I created them just to aesthetically. So they are not following the order of the original manuscript. And even the original manuscript is not, like sometimes some of them are not chronologically ordered. So sometimes the original text would be there and people would keep adding and adding. That's the reason you find this, like beautiful, amazing layout. So I do the same thing. Sometimes I remove some parts, and this also comes to the question of the text and its legibility, and also working with cursive text, because some of these also, let me grab one. You can see how the text is really, some of them very small. So I need also to make sometimes I would make some edits inside them, and I would select and I would change in them in order to, like have really, because I'm looking for the visual impact also, not only the content of them.
Oh, thank you so much. And then we have another question that was put in the chat from Zed Azmi. How much of a movement or culture is there in Egypt for experimental book arts?
So, like when I came, like when I left Egypt, like 10 years ago, there wasn't, like there was a couple of things. So there is an exhibition that happens in Alexandria, Bibliotheca Alexandrina, Binali, every 2 years for book art. So this is the main event in Egypt. And there are also a couple of places that started to teach not book arts, but you would find places that would teach maybe workshops in paper making, some other in calligraphy. Calligraphy is gaining momentum a lot there. Some places are teaching typography, but there is no like something like a center for book arts, which is something I have been also thinking of, like to create a center for teaching book arts in Egypt, because this is something we miss in Egypt. There are printers, there are some paper makers, there are bookbinders, but in the traditional way. But some book artists also, there are some book artists and artists who use the book form in their work in different ways, but no academic program and no center that would include all the book arts in it. So I'm hoping in the future that I'll be able to open something like this, where there would be like letterpress studios, paper making, binding classes. This would be really, I think, would be really something Egypt needs, and a great addition to the artistic movement there.
Yeah, it was really, really good to get your perspective on that, because I also came to the US from India to study. Like I came to art school over here because the resources that we have at home, like we just didn't have like that same the same expansive amount of resources the way there is over here. So was it what is that experience like for you after studying in the US to kind of divide your time between the US and Egypt? How does that go for you?
Like really, like going to the center for the book was really the best, like decision I've done in my life. Like going through this program, learning about, like the different components of book art, because also, like it's not only about the technique and the like learning a couple of things, but also there were theory classes. There were, like there were the conservation lab where I worked for a while. So all these different elements really help you when you start working on your artwork and in the concepts themselves. So there were classes about the history of the book, the future of the book. Like we had long discussions on like what the book should look like, how we can interpret it in the digital age. All these things really helped me in doing my work now. And as you said, like same thing for Egypt also. Like before coming, no program there. There are some apprenticeship, binding, all done in the traditional way, but not as a contemporary modern book art. So, yeah, I'm glad that I went through this program, and like I always also like to. Like be between Egypt and US, and like getting this experience back to Egypt also is the part that I want to work on it. Yeah.
Amazing, thank you. And then we have a question from Eduardo in the Q&A, which asks, when you make a large edition book, 20 plus copies, do you have assistants who help you in the process?
So, like the original books that I did, so a lot of my books that I edited were originally a book that I created in a class as a part of a class. So for example, this was made as part of the artist book class. I did only one copy of that I made an edition. So same thing for this. So this is an edition of one book. Then I like the idea. And I consider these, when I first do them, as a mock-up. So if there is something that I don't like, or like it didn't work well, if I want to change something, this would be like a really good opportunity to make this mock-up and then change in it later. So at the beginning, I started with my editions were 15 to 20, but now with my recent books, so my editions are, so for Statera, for example, it is 30. For Mare Nostrum, it's 50. And for Transpose, it's 40. So for these, I started to like outsource some of the work. So for example, the laser cutter, I don't do it. I would prepare the file. I would, like on Illustrator and Photoshop and all this, and then I would give it to someone who would do it. The bone work, for example, I would give it for someone to do. What else? The brass in Mare Nostrum, same thing. But the thing I do, and I enjoy really doing it, is the binding. So all the binding I do, all the paper making also. I used to do the paper for some of my books. So here, for example, I did the whole books. But since I have no access also now to paper mill, I would, there are some book artists in Egypt who create paper, so I would use their paper. I would ask them for specific for the paper, or I would bring from here, from the US, handmade paper, because there are books that I need the hand paper in it. But again, I would do the binding, and I enjoy doing it. I think it's kind of a meditative process once you start doing it. The box making, I do it, the design of the book, but some aspects that, you know, like, are time consuming, especially when it's a large edition, I use the help of others. But it's not like an assistant that I have. It's someone who would make me the laser, for example, someone who would cut the wood for me and prepare it for me, someone who would cut the bones and prepare it for me, and so on. Yeah.
I'm glad you spoke a little bit about the binding, because this is actually a question that I've had for like a while with like with regards to your work. And I know you touched on it a little bit too, about like, and we can see in your work how you do use a lot of non-traditional binding, how you use a lot of exposed bindings, and how you combine a lot of different binding techniques. But I was wondering if you could speak a little bit more about like the process behind choosing what kind of binding you want for a book, like what feels right and what inspires you to choose that binding.
Sure. I think I have can we have the other book? I think this is a good example for the binding and its use. I'm glad we had this here also. So this is another book that also was added to the Letterform Archive, and I think this answers your question perfectly. So here, just a moment, I'm pulling this.
Gotta unwrap it. It's
newly
arrived.
Brand new. So here, this is book. It's called Unleash. So just here. Oh, okay. Here it is. So here, it's called Unleash. So it have these wrappers around it. And when I'll open the book, but so you will know why I'm using this structure also. So it have these, but instead of bones, I have them here laser cut on wood. So this book starts with text. So this was one of my books that I used only English text inside it, while the imagery is from Persia. So this is an image of an angel from Persia. So it starts with these different words about being, you know, like confined, limited. So all, you know, like different words. And then we start to see the angel is working his way through these letters, through these words. And as he's doing so, the words are no longer read. So they are transferred into just an array of letters. You can't see the words anymore. And also the angel is trying to go outside of the book.
Was there a specific reason that you chose to work in English for this book?
I like the way the letters would be. And again, because, you know, like, I'm going back to the question of the cursive. This could have been not, I think doing this in English is better, because, you know, like the cursive letters in Arabic wouldn't allow me to do a lot of the things, you know, like with disconnecting the words and converting them into letters as I'm doing it in English.
That's very interesting, because even in the beginning, conceptually, you were talking about like confinement, confines, boundary with this book, and that really plays into the language as well.
Exactly. So, you know, like the angel starts to go outside of the book, and also in doing this, we start to see the human face is building up here towards the end. And then, you know, like you get the idea of, you know, like this closure is also about, you know, like enclosing this angel inside, and then it has the two forms, the face and the angel on the front of the page as a way to close the book also. So a lot of times the structure itself is part of the content. Or for example here, so in the sequence book, I wanted really a structure because this is almost 40 sections of books. So I wanted something that extends. So I used the Greek binding because of that. So yeah, I would choose the binding depending also on the content of the book. Or in my new book Transpose, I wanted something that almost like a pamphlet stitch, where I stitched the books on a wooden dowel. So same thing, the binding or the structure plays an important role, and I choose it depending on the project I'm doing.
Thank you so much for sharing
Uh-huh.
that.
Uh-huh.
And then in the Q&A, we have a question from Anne, who asks, what is the most unusual material you've ever worked with?
Most unusual material. I think the plexiglass is, like, because it's not usually used in the books. So I did a series of books that would have a plexiglass covers, and then from the inside it would be paper, hand paper that I made. So this contrast between, like the shiny plexiglass and then the interior that is made out of handmade paper flags or whatever is really interesting, especially when you are able to see what's inside the book without opening it. But and leather, of course, is also interesting material, like it adds a lot to the books. But I'm experimenting now with metal also. So in my new book, there are some metal parts of it. And this might be also a new direction that I'll be working with, adding metal to my books in a way, because it's also historically, like during Middle Ages, there were books that were chained, and there were books that had metal clasps and metal decorations on them, and hold it in metal boxes. So this is something I'm exploring now. Yeah.
That's amazing. Do you ever think about opacity and transparency as almost as concepts when you're working with your pieces? Because I know when you said plexiglass, that would be interesting, because most of your works that we've seen has been with wood. So even when you're stenciling or like using the laser cutter to cut parts out of the wood, like there's parts where you're able to see through, but then there's also parts where you're not able to. And I feel like with metal and with wood, you really have that power to choose what people can see and what people can't see. So how does that change when you use something like plexiglass?
So for plexiglass, you need to, have different considerations, like because, like, as you said, the content will appear. So you need to think of the design of the first section and the last section. But also the transparency sometimes is part of the book. So, like a lot of kinds of paper, you can control it to have this kind of transparency where you can see through it the next page. So a lot of my books I would print on very light paper. So, like you can see the next section or the next page without even turning the page. So I did it in a lot of my pieces where, so there is a piece, Inception, it's called Inception, about the people who resettled from Syria and Iraq to Philly, where, like I used laser cutting, I used also printing, and each section have a very light paper that I printed on it. So you can see the text on it, and then when you, even without turning the page, you can see the laser cut images of the different pages of the different birds and elements. You can see it also. It's on my website as well. You can see it.
Lovely. Thank you so much. And then we do have one more question in the Q&A that was just put in from Zed
Sure.
Azmi. Is there a way that book conservation or restoration and the experimental can interact?
So yeah, I worked for a while at the conservation lab, and it was really a great experience for me. I learned a lot in like book action, and really how the structure of the book and how to take care of a book and all that. But also there is a very important artist and conservator. Her name is Heidi Kyle. And she created a lot of structures that book artists are using now because of, so she started this as a conservation. So the structure would be used in conservation, but the artists found it very appealing that they started using it. And she created, there is a book that she created, it's called The Art of the Fold. The Art of the Fold. It's really amazing book. So she lists all these different structures, and most of them are not usually used, like it's not like the traditional structures. A lot of them are things that she came up with, mostly for, you know, like collection management. So she would need a specific portfolio, for example, to hold a specific material and so on. So she created these structures specifically for conservation, but later on, artists started to use them, and book artists started to use them in their work. So yeah, you should have a look at this book. It's a great book. So again, you know, like working in conservation or in a studio or in a bindery definitely will changes your idea, changes your practice. Even, you know, like so a lot of my experience in computer, so working as a graphic designer before going to graduate school, helped me a lot in, you know, like composing a lot of the pages that I'm doing, working with type, adjusting page layout, all these. So all these experiences add up to what you've been doing. Yeah.
Great, thank you so much. And since we only have about 8 minutes left and we don't have any more questions as of now, would you mind flipping through maybe some other pieces, like either of your own works or works that you looked at the archive today that were really interesting to you? Like anything you want to share with us in the last few minutes.
Yeah, we didn't show this. So this is a really beautiful piece here, and it got a lot of images also. And I always find inspiration in these, you know, like old documents. So it can be so I look at different things, you know, like when I was at Iowa, for example, I would go to the special collections and see what they have. And so because you're not only, you know, like after my study in book arts, you're not only looking at the content of the book, but you start to look at things like the paper, for example. So here, you know, like the paper is, you know, like it's almost transparent, you know, like, so, you know, like you can see my hand on the back here. It's just beautiful. So you start to look at these different things, the gilding that was made, the structure itself, and then you start to, you know, like think of ways to convert these into new ideas or new books in book art. So, you know, like the introduction page, and always with all these elaborate details. So all these, you know, like whenever I see one of these, I think that, you know, like this is not only a book, but this is a library of ideas for book artists that they should be looking at. So look, and the kind of also, you know, like thing that you find. So you can see this sketch here, or this marginalia here, that is handwritten. Just beautiful, the kind of, you know, like things that you are not expecting and you find in the book.
It's incredible how fragile the pages look as well, and how well they hold up for so long. And the structure itself, you know, like
how it's all together, the things like the here the end bands and how they are made. So all these things, really, the colors and the designs on the front and back covers.
In a lot of these old traditional books, the binding isn't really exposed. So what was kind of your thought process behind choosing to have so much exposed binding in your work?
Oh, so I like it exposed because a lot of people are not using these bindings now. So, but when you see really how the book is structured, for example, like here, this adds a lot of interest of it. And also structurally, one of the advantages of using the Coptic is that it opens completely. So, it opens completely, it can be completely open. So, which is really good in some of the books. You need that in order to start, flipping through it.
Absolutely. When I was learning bookbinding, Coptic was one of my favorite techniques as well.
Yeah, and also the action that you get, flipping these different sections like this. So some of my books also that works with, Islamic geometry and looking at how the forms transfer from one form to another. So I have a series called the Metamorphosis series, where I look at, for example, a square and how it can be converted to a more elaborate designs, the star designs and different design. So you can see, you can flip through it, not by flipping page by page, but by flipping the whole book. It's almost like an animation, where you can see the image starts to change, as a movie almost. So that's the reason also of using this structure, because it works well with the concepts of the book.
And what's your favorite way to document all your works? Do you have videos on your website, or is it mostly just photos?
Mostly photos, but I think I really need to make videos, because a lot of the pieces needs to be, in order to get the full experience. At least the video will give you more experience, showing the flipping of the pages, showing the the action of the book. You don't get this when with the images only. Sometimes the images are good, but videos might be in some of the works much better. I think especially for my newest work that depends on the boxes and the opening the box and all this. Otherwise, you will have to get like 20 or 30 images in order to show every part of it and show the whole experience of it.
Absolutely, almost like a stop motion animation or something.
Yep.
They're so dynamic. Like I'm feeling so sad that I can't be there to interact with them in person. I'm just itching to touch them. But anyways, we do only have 1 minute left, so I think we should start wrapping up.
Okay.
It was a huge honor to have you in the space, and just to have you share like your work with us, old work, new work, all of it, especially in relation to a lot of the work that you yourself were seeing at the archive. It was so amazing to see your work put into context like that. So thank you so much. Just thank you.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed being here and doing the research visit and seeing all your new also things. I'm also something that I was just speaking with Stephen before we started, is how the collection of the archive expanded, not to include only Western type and Western ideas, but also how it have really from different parts of the world, Arabic, Indo. So that's really exciting to see. So thank you.
Absolutely. And I'd also just like to extend a huge thank you for Stephen for helping with everything in person, helping set up the document camera, jumping in at such short notice. That was clutch. Thank you. And a huge thank you to the collections team, especially Hank, Paula, and Kate and Ellis for organizing the research visit and making sure that everything ran smoothly. Yeah, thank you everyone for coming.
And
thank you
thanks
to our
for everyone
audience.
attending from, like every part of the world, like friends and, like everyone who attended. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. We're gonna sign off now.
Bye.
Okay, bye.